Hello everybody, welcome back. And today we're going to look at the brand new PN70 mount from PN Racing, and I haven't even had a chance to look at the instructions on this yet. I bought the gears that PN Racing has because I thought it'd be cool to have something different than a just a 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 gear ratio. And this has a 64 pitch 41 tooth spur with a 10, 11, or 12 tooth pinion, so I think it's going to run pretty smooth. Also, one of the things, I thought this deadbolt was in its end state, but as it turns out, one of the things I didn't like about it is the fact that it has the motor mounted so high, and it's a heavier motor than stock by quite a bit. It's 18 grams, and it sits very high and very far back. When PN Racing announced that they were coming out with this new motor mount, I was kind of curious to see how that would work. And it comes with instructions, screws, which I've never had before, as far as when I ordered something like that for mounting the PN70 motor before. It's going to get a PN90, but there are going to be a few challenges with this motor, I think, because I'm running a metal ESC hot racing ESC mount, and the way this thing is supposed to mount is engine forward. I can install it engine backwards probably in minutes, but I want to do it proper, and I'm gonna have to find out if I need to get rid of that in favor of the stock mount once again. But I don't want to tear it up because it's good for either the deadbolt setting or the C10. It's got multiple shock mounting points, so I may end up keeping this for later. I don't know yet. We'll find out. But I'll show you a stock photo from PN Racing's promotional material that shows how the motor is supposed to mount forward. And got a dog hair in there, sorry about that. Anyway, I'm gonna give it a shot and find out if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I bought it myself, so I will give you an honest opinion. They're not sponsoring me, they paid me nothing to do this, but it even comes with how-to instructions. How about that? And it tells you to remove quite a bit here. So I am going to have to go with the stock ESC mount, and I guess the hot racing one's going to go back into storage for a while. I'll start by showing you the stock photo of how it's supposed to mount, and then we'll proceed forward from there. Alright, I was looking ahead in the instructions a little bit and was noticing a few things. First of all, I'm going to have to reflip my skid plate around, because in order to use this Thingiverse or Shapeways, I can't remember where I got this motor mount, right here, this part. In order to use that one, you have to flip the motor plate, or the skid plate around. So I'm going to have to reflip that back to the stock position, because the transmission needs to be on the back side again. So there's no instructions for flipping the skid plate like you have to do with 3D printed parts. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and install the motor mount, and or install the motor on the mount with a new PN70 motor. I'll throw the gears in it, and we'll be able to compare the motor heights at the output shaft from the bottom. This is a 3D mount that I think I bought it from Shapeways, and as you can tell here, this is the hole for the motor up here. It sits very high in the chassis, and the stock one sits quite a bit lower. I have one of those. Here's a comparison of all three of these motor plate mounts. This one is equivalent to stock, but it has the extra holes drilled for the barrage motor, so you can mount either stock or barrage. This is similar to the motor mount that I have currently in my Deadbolt, and this hole here is where the output shaft of the motor is for stock. This way up here, see how much higher it's going to carry the motor? This is the baseline bottom of the chassis where it sits, this black tape line that I've made. And as you can tell, it's a whole stock motor higher. And this one is only about half a width higher. And usually these come mounting in close to the bottom. If it's similar to this one, it mounts close to the bottom, and I'm assuming this one will too. So it's probably going to be about 4 or 5 millimeters lower, and that will matter on a truck this big. So I'm going to proceed forward with this and just kind of install the motor mount with a brand new PN70 motor. I'm going to use that other one I have back in a race car again, because that was a fast motor, and it doesn't matter so much in a crawler because you're not competing with speed, and it wouldn't be a bad thing just to have a fresh motor installed as we go forward. We'll take a quick look at the gear choices that you have with this PN70 kit. Stock is a 5-to-1 ratio, which means that the pinion gear has to turn 5 times to rotate the pinion once. The hot racing gear system they have with the 0.5 modulus is a 4-to-1 ratio, and that's roughly equivalent to this one right here, because this is a 10 tooth and this is a 41 tooth spur. And if you want to stick with what you had before, you can do that. If you were previously running a one of these Shapeways mounts and you like that gear ratio, it's pretty high, and this motor spins very quickly, but it's got a lot of torque, so it works out well. But this is what we're used to with this motor and this plate here. So if you've seen my truck run, if I wanted to keep the gearing the same, I'd leave it with this. If I wanted the truck to be faster, I'd put this one on, and this would be even faster. This is a 4.1 to 1 gear ratio. This is a 3.72 roughly gear ratio. So this turns this, for every time this goes around once, this has to go around 3.72 times. For every time this goes around once with this gear, this one has to turn only 3.42. So the ratios are 4.1, 3.72, and 3.42. So it's going to be quite a bit faster. In fact, it's probably around 15 to 20% faster if you were to use this gear here. And this is a 2mm output shaft, so it won't work on a stock motor. Just FYI, in case you were thinking about installing this on a stock motor. You can buy 0.5 modulus gears with a 1.5 aperture on eBay. If you know where to look, you can find them. But these will not work on a stock motor. The hole is a 0.5 millimeter too big. Sorry about that, guys, but they're easy to get if you want something like that. I feel like the current gearing in my Deadbolt is more than enough, and it has a 4-to-1 gear ratio. So I'm going to stick with this 10 tooth pinion and just go with the gear it has here. And this is a Delrin. All three of these are Delrin, and it's really nice plastic. It's very durable. It's quiet. And this is an alloy metal spur gear. So if I did nothing, I could just keep the same gears on here that I have now, and it would be fine. But I'm going to use the PN stuff just because it came with the kit, and I want to see if it's any quieter with this Delrin gear and this alloy one. I've pre-installed the pinion gear onto this motor, and according to the diagram, the way it's pictured here, this is going to be important later. This shows the wiring tabs, which are these here, where the wires hook up, on the opposite side of where you're going to have the motor hook up. So these need to be on opposite sides, because later on it shows it here for the adjustment. This plate actually bolts onto this, and it does not show the tabs on this side. So we need to make sure it goes on like this. And they've included the screws with that. I'm going to go ahead and use just a tiny touch of Loctite glue just to keep it in place. When you install these screws, do not over tighten them. If you do, they'll strip out, and that's what it looks like installed. Alright, here's the next step in the build. Pretty simple. This has a slot right here that goes right here, and this is your adjustment for gear mesh. The spur gear is going to sit in this area right here, and this will fit right in like that, and that's going to be an open gear system, and you're going to adjust your gear mesh by sliding it like this. So I'm going to put the screws in here. I'm not going to Loctite these, but the transmission will be on the other side of that, but this is how it goes together. I just want to say thanks again to Nick from Mofo RC for these tools. They are so good. I love them. It cuts the time that I would spend using that fiddly little stock wrench that the truck comes with, and this thing is awesome. These tools are fabulous. I wish I had them a long time ago, and they make working on these much more efficient, because you can just spin these little screws off no problem, and it would have taken quite a bit longer with an Allen wrench. Just want to say thanks, Nick. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is prepare the ESC tray for the new motor. There's not enough room for the motor and the ESC tray, but there is if you get rid of part of it. Normally the ESC trays don't have these holes in them, but I cut them just to lighten it, because I want my rigs to do the most extreme things possible, and every gram counts, and that's probably 3 or 4 grams that we're taking off the top of the vehicle. Overall, I think this is gonna be equal or less than current, because I have a metal ESC tray, which probably isn't good. That's up high, and that's heavier than necessary, so that will be corrected today. I don't think it's going to hurt anything that I had these holes pre-drilled in there, because you're going to end up cutting most of this away anyway, and it's going to lose this mounting point right here. You'll still have these 3, but 1 on this side and 2 on this side, but it doesn't have to hold that much weight. It just has to sit there, and the structural part is the front here, and this is where the shock hooks up, and this is where the body mount goes. So it should still have plenty of rigidity, even with what I've done to it on 3 posts. And the instructions say put the marking sticker and cut the edge line. So I'm going to put the marking sticker the way they've written it, with the arrow that's right there, into the corner of the ESC tray. Where that is marked is pretty close to what the picture shows, but that's gonna really cut it close on this side here. So I think I'm going to cut it out here a little bit farther, and then if I need to clearance it with the Dremel tool later, I can do that, but I'm going to leave a little bit of meat on that, just because I think only about 1.5 millimeters is not enough to maintain structural support. If I need to, I can always tie these two together with something. I could always glue something in there, but I'm gonna make a line right through here and just keep a little bit more meat on that. But I'll go ahead and cut this. I've got no problem cutting this out or losing this piece here. I'll spend a few minutes here reflipping my skid plate back to its stock position. I'll remove this metal hot racing mount in favor of this lightweight plastic one that I've cut, and I'm just going to be able to stick this right back on just as it was. And in theory, that should be just fine. I've got no problem with that. If I need to, I can always clearance the bottom of the ESC tray a little bit, or actually the ESC plastic housing if I need to. But I'll get that put back on the way it was stock, and I guess I'll have this extra hot racing plate that's been modified on the front here to clear an Emax servo. So that's something. These are the two motor mounts side by side, and I'll try to get a better view of that for you here. I'll try to line them up where the screw holes are going to be, and you can see that the PN mount is going to mount significantly lower than the Shapeways, and center of gravity is not affected by the orientation of the motor, whether it's sitting sideways or vertical, because the center of gravity for the motor happens at the shaft, not the outer edges. It's symmetrical, so it's CG of the motor itself is at the center point. And it looks to me like that's going to be a lot. I mean, that's about 1/2 centimeter different, and when you're trying to climb, that's going to be a big deal. And I think that by switching from this heavier motor mount, I should have weighed the other one before putting it in. I'll weigh this one right now, but this is pretty heavy, and I'm kind of surprised I ever installed that in the first place, given the fact that I try to keep all the weight down low on the bottom and not have any up top. And that's an 8.4 gram piece, and I bet the one I put on is maybe 3. It was pretty chopped up, pretty small. So I'm gonna save 5 grams there, and I'm gonna lose some of that with this metal mount. But again, it's all low, and it's going to be holding this motor forward in the vehicle, so it's going to give the car an overall CG advantage. And I think the difference in weight is going to be negligible, just because I'm getting rid of this heavy metal piece and in favor of this lightweight aluminum one, even though it's, I'm sure, lighter. I should have weighed that. I'm sorry for not weighing that. I should have weighed those pieces before I put them together. But I'm gonna pull this motor off of the oh, you know what, I'll hold on a second. I'm gonna get a measurement from the bottom of this assembly here to where the center line of the shaft is currently, and that's right at 22.8. So when I reinstall the PN70 with the new mount, we'll call it 22.5. When I reinstall the this motor onto the transmission, I wish I had a second transmission unit, then I could just leave this one as it is, but I have to reuse the transmission. Anyway, call it 22.5, and once it's installed and the gear mesh is set, we'll be able to get an accurate reading of how much lower this motor is actually going to sit. Okay, I'm going to show you the hot racing gear and the PN70 gear from PN Racing. And this is a 64 pitch. I don't know what the modulus is on that, but this is a 0.5 mod gear, and they do not match. This is a much finer cut gear. It's going to run smoother and quieter, and may even last longer. But this one shows really no wear coming out. But this one is a bit noisier than stock. I'm expecting good things from this, but they do not line up. So don't think you're going to be able to buy a PN set of gears unless you buy a 2mm output shaft motor and the PN spur gear, because they won't mesh. Hot Racing and PN don't play well. They would never mesh. And these won't mesh either with your stock gears, because it's not a 0.3 mod gear either. Well, there does, after all, appear to be a little bit of gear wear. Just this dust here is that silver from the gear and the spur. I'll clean that up and show you what it looks like with the PN set mounted. And I'll try to add this earlier in the video maybe, but I'm gonna have to take these two screws out and remove this so that I can put the retainer screw for the pinion on, because right now with the motor sitting there I won't have the clearance to do it. This is a critical part. When you set the gear mesh, it has to be able to move a little bit but not be too loose that the gears don't line up. And what I like to do is check the gear mesh at various parts along the gear to make sure it's not too tight or too loose. I want it to be, it's too tight there. I want it to be able to move slightly no matter what part of the rotation the gear is in. Oops. There, it just popped out. And make sure that it's catching on all the teeth. Looks like that could be slid on even a little farther. I'll work on that gear mesh, but this is critical. What I'll do before I even hook it up to the truck is I'll hook the wires up. I'll swap them over from the old motor, get the soldering iron out, and just move those over to the new motor and check it to make sure it sounds right before proceeding. Alright, I've hit a bit of a snag here. I'm trying to put the front end together. I've got the thing all mounted in, mocked up, and set in place. The rear axle's fine. I had to re-flip it because I had flipped it previously. This center plate, I'd flipped this previously to accommodate the other PN70 mount that I had previously, and in the process of flipping it back, this plate's a bit thicker than the stock one, and I'm running into an issue where this cannot collapse enough, that slip joint, to be able to compress the suspension, and that's a bit of a problem. Make sure everything's out of the way. Yeah, it's pushing on the drive shaft, so I'm going to have to shorten that just a little bit and provide just a tiny bit of clearance, maybe a millimeter or two, in order to get this suspension to compress all the way. And I've just discovered a pretty critical error. The upper control arm hits the PN70 body right there. That's a big problem because there's no way around that. They didn't mention that at all, and that's a huge issue because you can't get full suspension compression without bending the control arm, the upper control arm. I can notch it a little bit right there, and that'll give me about 3 millimeters, but I can't notch it too much or this is going to be ruined. This control arm right here, that's hitting the motor. I thought it was the drive shaft because it was initially, but once I clearance the drive shaft to give it a little bit of a gap there, it's the arm, the upper control arm's hitting it. PN should have said something about that when they built this, because they're selling them, and that's a problem. I can't see it being much better with the C10 because it's going to go out even farther forward and possibly be even more of a clearance issue. But I'm going to see what I can do. I'm going to basically take this control arm out and thin it so it's only half as thick. I'm going to take the top down, and hopefully that'll give me the clearance I need. That's a big problem. So if you couldn't tell from the previous picture, when this suspension compresses, you see that wishbone here? This part of the wishbone is hitting the motor and stopping. It will not compress the front end. You will not get full articulation. And I've got to figure out a way to deal with that. PN built a really, really nice motor mount, but they failed to consider the fact that the motor is so large that it's actually even going to come in contact with the drive shaft. The other way around this to give me a little bit more clearance is to use one of the bigger spur gears, because then the motor will naturally sit higher because it's going to have to be up higher for the clearance. That is really a disappointing finding. I'll go ahead and publish this, and then I'll finish it later because it's getting late. Alright, here's another problem. If I'm going to raise this motor, we have an issue that the ESC is going to sit even higher than before, because this motor, even with the lowest gear setting, which would provide the lowest physical position on the motor mount, is already sitting higher than the motor mount itself, or the ESC mount. So the ESC is going to be sitting in here crooked, with this half sitting on the motor and the other edge on this side here. It's going to be cockeyed, and it's only going to get worse with bigger gears because the motor is going to sit higher. They've tried to put too much motor in a space that can't handle it, and they need to say something about that, in my opinion, because this is not working out with the Deadbolt chassis.